Hi, this is Michelle from Crochet Between Worlds, and this is a short video to show you how to do the multi-level blocks for our new Bargello blocks blanket patterns. There are two versions of this pattern. There's a lap blanket which has blocks of 3 rows high, and then there's the queen size bedspread which has blocks that are 5 rows high. In this video, I'm just going to be showing you the video of the blocks 3 rows high, but the principle is the same. If you're doing 5 rows, you just repeat rows 2 and 3 again to make rows 4 and 5. So to start off, we're going to do a foundation single crochet. I'm not using the correct colours for the blanket, but using more contrasting colours so that you can more easily see the difference. So for the foundation single crochet, there are other tutorials for this available online, but you do 2 chain and then go back into the first loop and draw up a loop, do your chain through that loop and then make your single crochet. And then you go back through that first chain that you made, which is a bit hard with this yarn because it strands a bit. Do your chain and then your single crochet. And by doing a foundation single crochet rather than just a foundation chain, it's much easier to work into both for the first row of your Bargello blanket body, and it's also easier to work into when you're doing the border later. So this blue I'm pretending is my border colour, because with this blanket you do the first row of the border before you even start the body of the blanket. Doing it this way also means that it's easier to count the number of stitches that you have, which when these blankets start with well, at least 100 stitches can be really helpful. So we can see here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's more than enough stitches that I need for this tutorial, so I'm just going to pull up that loop and leave the blue attached. When you're making this blanket, you leave this loop until the very end, and then this is what you pick up in order to keep working the border around the blanket. So the first block is 5 stitches wide. So I'm going to pick up my pink yarn because it's a nice contrast to the blue. So you need to count 5 stitches from the back. Ignore this little funny stitch at the front. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's my 5th stitch, and we'll work through the top 2 loops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops, that's my 6th stitch. We'll go back. So I always start the new colour with a stacked standing double crochet, and the way to do that is you pick up a loop, you put your hook through the desired stitch and pull back, so you effectively make a single crochet, but we want a double crochet, not a single. So you put your hook through the left 2 legs of that initial single crochet and do another one, and that effectively gives you a fake single crochet, double crochet stitch. So we're going to do 5 double crochet including that starting one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's the beginning. Now we have to turn around. So we do 1 chain and then turn. You should always turn the same way. It doesn't really matter which way you turn. The important thing is to be consistent, because then your stitches won't look twisted at the end, or at least they'll look consistently twisted. So we'll start again with the stacked standing double crochet. So we do a single crochet and then another one into the left legs of the stitch, and we go back to the end. Okay, so that's 2 rows. So we'll do 1 more row in the pink. Now, because we've done an odd number of rows, we end up at the edge of the blanket. So there's our first little Bargello block, and we're over here. Normally this is where you'd finish off, but because this is just a sample piece, I'm not going to save on yarn. So there's our first block. The next block we're going to do in green to make sure, again, that it looks really different. And the next block is 3 stitches wide. So we count 1, 2, 3 stitches further along our starting foundation crochet. And so the first row we do in exactly the same way. So you make a single crochet and then work into the left legs of that stitch to make the stacked standing double crochet. And then we'll go 1, 2, 3. Now if we just kept going back and forth, there'd be no joining between this block and that block, so you'd have ugly holes in your blanket, and that's not what we want. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a slip stitch into the end of that first row that we did, or it's actually the start. So that joins those two rows together. So now we turn, again, always turning the same way. Now we're going to join up here when we come back the other way, so don't worry about that at the moment. This is going to be a perfectly boring normal row. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, double crochet. Okay, and now we go back the other way again. So stacked standing double crochet. And then another one. Okay, and now this is the bit where it perhaps gets a tiny bit tricky. So we start your double crochet like you normally would, stick it through this stitch, but we're also going to stick it through this stitch here, which is the bottom of the top row of the adjacent one. And so we're going to pick up that and join those 2 squares together like that at that point. And then you just continue your double crochet as usual. But see how now this row is joined all the way across, and when we slip stitch into the top of this row here, which is normally what you do if you've made our Bargello baby blanket, and now these 2 blocks are joined together, there's no holes, and you're ready to keep going across for the next block. One of the things that I really love about this blanket is if you get the first row right, so you get the numbers down here right, you don't have to count at all for the rest of each row as it's worked on the diagonal, because you just follow what's on the block underneath. So because this block doesn't have another block on this side, we just make it the same way as we did the first block. So you go back and forth for 3 rows. Now at the top of the stacked standing double crochet can be a little bit difficult to find. It is there, you just might have to wiggle the stitch around a little bit. But I promise it does make your work look much neater at the end, and certainly neater than if you use chains, which tend to make a bit of a stringy bit in the middle of your blanket, which is not necessarily what you want. You want the focus to be on the colours that you've chosen. 4, 5. There we go. So now we're back at the beginning. And again, I'm not going to end off that thread like I usually would, because we're being conservative with yarn and not wasting anything. So now we've got a block of 5 and a block of 3 and then a block of 5. So now I'm going to do a second block of 3, which I don't think is exactly in accordance with the pattern, but it'll just help us have another go at that tricky little bit in the middle, where you have to join into the square next door. So I have some cream yarn for this section. Okay, so we start in exactly the same way every time. So we'll do 3 blocks, so 1, 2, 3. So we'll go into this stitch. And so we pick up a loop, stick it through, bring it back and make our single crochet. Go through the left legs and pull it through, pull a loop through to make another single crochet. And we'll go 1, 2, 3. Now we join on to the top of the next row adjacent, then turn and go back the other way. And turn, and we go all the way along until we get to the last stitch of the row, which is not very far away for this one. So now again we need to join back into this space. So start your double crochet, put it in the stitch that you need to work into, and then also stick your hook through the top of the adjacent stitch, and then slip stitch to the top there. Now we do our next stack standing double crochet. 1, 2, 3. Now we need to join, chain and turn. The going back row, the second row is always just a standard row. Chain and turn. So we do 1, 2, and then for the third one, we start the stitch like normal. Put your hook in the target stitch and into the adjacent gap. So you can see it's with the same place that you started the third row in for the previous block. And pull it all the way through. Finish that stitch and then slip stitch to the top here. And now there's no block here, so this one's just worked as a plain back and forth for 3 rows. So if you're doing the version that has 5 rows, you can see it's exactly the same situation. You just keep, you just do rows 2 and 3 again. So you'll have 2 places where this stitch happens. It seems a bit weird and tricky to start off with, but I promise once you've done a lot of them, it's really straightforward. 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so if we lay it out here, pull all the threads out of the way. There we go, we can see our blocks. So we have our blue border, it's down here. We've joined each diagonal stripe colour onto the border, and then when you come back around you can see how easy it's going to be to work back into the other side of that foundation single crochet. And then for each block you work the first row, slip stitch join, work the second row with no joining, and the third row on the last stitch you insert your hook not only into your target stitch but also into the adjacent stitch where the next stitch was worked into as well, and then slip stitch to the top there too. And you can see it looks nice and flat on the front, and it looks pretty good on the back too. It does tend to pull in a little bit, but that's where the beauty of the Bargello colour wash comes in, is that if you think you're working in a colour wash, so this colour is slightly lighter than this colour, which is slightly lighter than this colour, those bits where the stitch sort of digs into the next square, you don't even notice. And there we go. That's how we do the multi-row Bargello blocks.